welcome to the Amplify Film Festival. As you know, this is a Q&A today. I'm Anu Anand. I'm a broadcaster based in Bath. And in a moment, we'll be talking to the people behind the gripping film, Rose Plays Julie. Do please pop your questions and your comments into the chat on this forum. You can also tweet your questions and comments. You just need to tag @Amplify Film. So comments and questions in the chat or tweet them @Amplify Film, and we're going to get in as many as we can. And of course, please share your feedback about the film, the festival on social media. I'd love now to welcome our guests. Very excited to speak to all of our guests today. Christine Molloy is director, one of the directors of Rose Plays Julie. Hi, Christine.
Hi, Anu.
And we've also got Joe Lawlor, who directed the film with you. Hi there, Joe.
Hi there, Anu.
Orla Brady, who plays Ellen Wise, the mother in the story, joins us from New York. Is that right, Orla?
Yeah, that's right. Hi, Anu.
Hi. And Stephen McKeon. I hope that I pronounced that right, Stephen. Stephen did the music, is the composer for the film. Welcome to you.
Hi.
Now, Christine and Joe, I want to start with you. I mean, you know, we know the film is about this young girl called Rose. She's a veterinary student. She's been adopted at birth, and she's looking for her birth mother. And she's trying to fill in the circumstances of her life. That there's been this huge sort of mother-daughter vacuum in her life, and she's trying to fill that. But the film is very gripping. It's a very spare. There's not huge amounts of dialogue or movement at times. And I just wondered if you could talk to us about how you made the look of the film work, first of all, because I found it very, very gripping.
Well, I guess I'll start anew. I guess in our approach to filmmaking, we like things that are calmer and slightly dialed down, and where space is created. So we like to create a bit of space, and I find people compelling, and I find it compelling, I'm talking personally now, when I can see that people are thinking and processing and trying to figure things out. So in our film, Rose Plays Julie, there's a lot of things to figure out, complicated things that our characters have to figure out, negotiate and think about. And we want to create the space for that to happen. I know there's a real temptation to speed things up. We're always afraid of, you know, audiences and their attention span and all of that kind of stuff because of the world that we live in. But I think that there is something to be said for allowing space. And the other thing that we really like to do is to discover the worlds that our characters are going to exist in. So that would be a really important part of the jigsaw puzzle as it comes together for us in the writing process and in the thinking process when we're making a film. So, you know, defining each character very carefully through the world they are in, the physical locations, but also the things that they do. So what do they do with their time? You know, what jobs do they do? Where are they at in their lives? They're really important elements as well for us in terms of creating very particular cinematic worlds for our characters who are going on a cinematic journey.
Well, can I just pick up on that? And maybe Joe, you could talk about this, because the professions in the film, veterinary medicine, acting, archaeology, they're interesting professions, but the way that you've used them to draw the themes and the characters and, you know, what's happening together is really, well, I thought it was really interesting, and it really, you know, it sort of draws you in further. Joe, how did you come up with those themes and those professions? Was that a difficult process?
That was a difficult process, but not in the case of Ellen Orla's part in terms of Ellen. The idea of somebody whose job it is to play parts and to play roles is something that we have we're very drawn to, and not just in our own work. I mean, we've made work where people play out different parts for different reasons, but we're also very much drawn to films where somebody's identity might shift and they're also drawn to playing out roles. And I suppose the idea of somebody who's an actor, where they themselves inhabit roles and vacate themselves or their true selves to enter into someone else's world. We kind of like that a lot, and maybe Ellen prefers this at times, or at least it allows her to escape her own kind of difficulty of having to confront herself. Perhaps that's one of the motivating reasons for her to become an actress. Possibly that's for other people to kind of also conclude. We, in terms of Rose, we always had somebody working with animals, but we had somebody being a zoologist, actually. And for quite a while, there was a number of scenes involving a gorilla. And, but then we realized, actually, it's not that easy to get gorillas. And Ireland had one male gorilla who had died. And that was it. There was no others. And they weren't going to get another one. And then we thought, oh, I wonder if you could, with the advances in technology, regarding CGI, what about that in terms of, and then you hear the numbers of how much it would cost to have a CGI fur, and then you thought, oh, I wonder about those. I mean, we were beginning to think about those party shops when people could just dress in a gorilla suit. We were getting pretty desperate. And then we went and talked to this man, Rory Bretnock, who was the head of the veterinary school in UCD, which is the biggest veterinary school. It's like a functioning veterinary practice. And he said, actually, listen to your film, the story outline. I don't know if it's a zoologist you really require, but a veterinary science student. And once that happened, that begins to unlock certain things. And one of the things that it unlocked is the syringe. And prior to that, it was a scalpel. And that, because it was logical that you would end up with a scalpel if you went with a zoologist, but it was much more logical if you end up with a syringe with a veterinary science student. And that became much more intriguing, the idea of the syringe. And so little things about the jobs that people do, if you're interested in investigating what people's jobs are, you begin to look at the tools that they use and the metaphors that they are. Now, in the case of an archaeologist, that's not exactly a very subtle metaphor there. But in terms of following Rose, getting into the work and the kind of caring that they do, and the dawning realization that a lot of vets spend a lot of time putting animals down, and which is something we didn't know. And we thought, okay, I guess that makes sense.
I want to, Joe and Christine, I want to come back to some of those themes, and specifically the whole euthanizing of healthy animals. I mean, there's a real tension there with Rose's character, and sort of having been sort of given away, and the futility of that, and what is going on in the module that she's doing. But I just want to go to Orla and to Stephen, bring both of you in. Orla, you play the actress, the mother who's given this child away and built a new life for herself. And there's that scene where the two of you finally speak in the middle of a forest, and there's just sort of bird song. It's silent. It's really beautiful. And that one sentence where you explain how she came to be it's so short, it's devastating, and it's factual. And I actually had to listen to it twice. I was, so did I hear that correctly? Was that, I mean, there's so much to your character, but just that one moment, I mean, how did you approach that relationship and that revelation? Was that difficult?
Well, to begin with, I thought that it was a very fine piece of screenwriting. So often those moments are given a rather expansive speech, and it's not that that is necessarily a bad thing, but there can be a great power to someone who cannot speak in any in-depth way about what has happened to them, but can simply remove themselves from it and relate. This is what happened. It's if anything, it's a feature of Ireland as it was until very, very recently. Now we are trying to speak of our truth, of our difference, of our experience, and of our hurt and pain and all those things that everybody goes through. But it certainly was the case that you didn't and couldn't before. And I mean, I could cite other screenplays where I've noticed this before, but sometimes there's just something as I don't know, just as succinct as that. It absolutely spoke more to me, and I hope to the audience, because there's so much underneath it and so much she can't do. And the effect of it, of course, is worse for the girl. And I think Ellen at that moment is not entirely sensitive to that. It lands. The the responsibility of it, if you like, lands on this young girl more. Am I wrong? That's
No,
Yeah.
what I was going to just chip into, kind of add to that, it was written like that, but in fact, it wasn't really going to be played like that. That came about also through a conversation with Orla about where to pitch something like that. And I think sometimes when you're writing a screenplay, you're writing it so it might be read in a particular way, but you don't really have an intention of playing it like that because it might be a little bit too heavy-handed. And I think the landing of that line and how controlled it was, and how that you might actually have to listen to it twice, that it just would pass quite gently. I think that actually came out of a conversation with Orla about how a moment like that could be played. And because you can play lines in a variety of different ways, and you can emote up at level 10, or it could be down here. So I think that performance of that also, just to say that it wasn't simply the text, was also about a conversation with Orla about how something like that might be played. I thought that.
And the other thing I just want to say, and I want to bring Stephen in, because the other thing I really noticed about the film is, like the way the film looks, Stephen, that the music is also spare and powerful. And sometimes it's kind of the only thing that's filling the scene besides what you see, so that there isn't any other sound or dialogue. There's just music. You just see these two women kind of, the kind of devastating impact of both knowing each other and knowing the truth. And I just wonder if you could talk to us about the music. Sometimes it also just ends abruptly. I mean, was that difficult to compose? How did you compose for a film like this?
Well, there was two challenges going into this. One was when I got the cut of the film, there was no music on it, and it was very clear that the film didn't, quote unquote, need music. So often you see a film and you can tell, here's all the places that we're going to have to use music. Rose Plays Julie doesn't need music. If you took all the music off it, it would still be a fantastic film. So that was the first challenge. And the second one was finding a place for the music. First of all, you had the subject matter. And secondly, as Joe just said, the film is very calibrated. It's very quiet. There's a lot of silence. The characters speak quietly. The tension ratchets up very, very slowly. So trying to find how music would even start was a real challenge. And what unlocked it was when I came up with the idea that the music would be a Greek chorus, and that the Greek chorus would be in the character of the gods watching on. And that immediately, without sounding too grandiloquent, gave the music a historical context. So in my formulation, the gods are looking on, and they've been looking on for a long time, and they're sometimes finding it very tragic. Sometimes they're finding what's happening amusing, and sometimes they just lose interest. So, for example, there's a scene where Orla's character is lying in bed. She's shot from above. She's remembering being raped, and the music is this very dark, portentous horns, and the audience may interpret it as just her remembering being raped, but in my mind, it's the gods looking on going, here we go again, another one, another woman who's been raped after millions of that's happened before too. And it has this kind of dark kind of tsunami from history just welling up. And then when the scene cuts and she's standing outside on a tennis court, and I tried to make the music amusing, so they're finding it amusing, and then the music just stops because they've lost interest.
Yeah.
So so that kind of worked quite well in scenes like where Aidan Gillen's character has just attempted to rape his daughter, and then the music builds this huge crescendo and then just abruptly stops, but not in a cinematic way where in cinema, normally when the music stops, it reverberates on and it kind of sounds a bit clever. We just stopped it. And suddenly all the sounds, his breath, him standing there appalled at himself, feels far more present and far more visceral. So we really honed in on that idea, that this idea that the music had a historical feel to it. And that, as I said, that unlocked it. It meant that the music could be quite big in a film that's quite quiet. So that was the approach. And just as a kind of a slight kind of other nuance to it, I just made sure that all of the musicians who played on it were women. So
Wow.
yeah, there's a chorus who are literally singing in Greek. They're all women. All the musicians are women.
Well, Stephen, that kind of raises another thing I wanted to talk to all of you about. So Christine, I'll give this question to you, but all of you chip in. I mean, you know, we have this film with 2 female lead characters. It is a triple F rated film, as in female. You know, was that deliberate, Christine? And what was it like to work on a film like that? Was it harder? Was it the same? I mean, sometimes we make, you know, too much of the gender thing, but in a way you're making too much of it so that it's nothing, so that it's just equal. But Christine, was that what you set out to do?
We definitely wanted a female-focused story. We've made, our first film was called Helen, which was also a very female-focused story, and then we made a film called Mr. John, which had a male character at its centre, and it felt really right for us for the next film. That's almost like dishing it out evenly, but that's not really the case. But it's what we were drawn to, what we wanted to explore again, was a female-focused story, and it feels very easy after that. I mean, in a way, I guess we're interested in questions around identity and belonging, what makes us who we are, and where we are in the world, and how we define ourselves in the world. So for me, it's as interesting to explore that in relationship to a male character as it is to a female character. But at any one time you make a decision, and maybe, you know, there's a film where it's equally about a man and a woman. You know, it doesn't really matter to me. It's the trait that you want to explore. But from the beginning with Rose Plays Julie, we absolutely knew that this would be a female-focused story. So, and we also wanted to take out a lot of the clutter sometimes around rape stories, where the act is contested. So was somebody raped or weren't they? Was there consent? Wasn't there? So that we could focus on it in a different way. So to just take all of that out of the way, all the uncertainty, the grey areas, the cloudiness, and just say, this is what happened. There was a woman, she was raped, she had a child, her child came looking for her, and then things proceeded from there. And those kind of elements were pretty clear from the beginning. But I'm not saying that it doesn't matter to me, because it matters a huge amount to me, what stories get told, how they're told, who tells them. They're always really important. But it doesn't mean that I would shy away at any stage from a film that might be male focused. But in that process, you would want to I'd want to bring my attention to such a story, and for that to be a really important element of it. And it's, I guess at the end of the day, as I said, the things that we're interested in apply to any sets of, narratives we might, find ourselves thinking about.
There's a question, Joe, that I'm going to share with you in a moment from someone watching. But Orla, I just also want to come to you because, the 2 characters, you've got sort of this very young woman and this, slightly more seasoned female character. But in both of them, you have this incredible vulnerability and strength. And I just wonder, is that very rare, to be offered a role like that? How did you feel about, the storyline of this film and the fact that there were these 2 female characters?
Well, I felt very strongly about it. I read the script as you do, and I was in love with it immediately, because I felt that it was a very true script. It was a very considered one. I didn't have to try and kind of contort myself to understand emotionally what was going on. But look, one of the things, and everyone who's ever acted, especially women, will understand this, is everyone's striving to create what they call strong female characters. And they're often, shouty and strong and, okay, you guys, they're tough rather than rounded characters. So it's like people are making efforts, but we're not in the place yet easily where we're just telling stories, where we're telling stories about people, some male, some female, some in the middle. What I loved about this is, yes, it was a story, centrally of 3 people, if you like, or very centrally about Anne's character, Rose. And these people did have their strengths and their huge vulnerabilities. And and that is the area of drama. That's what we are there to explore. We're not there to look at impressive toughies, although that can be very enjoyable as well.
Yeah. Joe, this is a question from Mike, and really it's to both of you, Joe and Christine, but he says, you once more return to the theme of changing identities. Can you explain why this is so important to your work? I mean, you've got, Rose, the main character, kind of wondering and being someone else in order to discover her past. Why is that important?
Well, I mean, we've thought about this quite a bit, and I think that maybe one day we'll engage a therapist and sit down and have a proper session to delve in deeper. But I do think there's two things that we've talked about before, but only recently, actually, only in the last year. And I think one of them is the fact that we both left Dublin in 1987 to come over to the UK to study. And I think that movement from one place to another, something happens to you as a person, a shift takes place. Milan Kundera, the Czech writer who lives in Paris, talks about, his friends back in the Czech Republic now, like, you're not really you there. This is where you belong. This is the full iteration of you. That's just some sort of carbon copy. And he wonders, is this the real me, or is the real me back in the Czech Republic? And so you carry those two kind of ideas about yourself once you leave a home. And the other thing is very much centered around my mother, partly to do with the fact that she was born in New York and was sent back to Ireland when she was 11 months unaccompanied. She was in the newspaper, youngest passenger to travel across the Atlantic. And so we've always imagined what she must have thought looking across the Atlantic Ocean, where she grew up in Ireland, in Kerry, about the version that there was of her left back there. Now, she subsequently, when she got older, developed lots of mental health problems. And so she would have these crashes and would end up in psychiatric hospitals. And also as a child growing up, you watch somebody transform and change, and who they are becomes different. And for a child to watch your mother go from this to this, that is, you begin to wonder about how strong and stable are we? Are we all prone to these kind of shifts and changes? And so I think, I don't know if that's the answer, but I'm thinking I might begin that with a therapist session and see where the therapist session might go from. But I think there are some of the starting points as to why we are very interested in the mutability of this psychology of a person.
And I would add, I'd quickly add that when we left Ireland ourselves in 1987, we went to a college in Devon called Dartington College of Arts, and you could study, we studied in the theatre course, you could study, writing, directing, choreography, but everybody performed. So the approach to acting, that idea was replaced, well, it was a completely brand new idea to me, with the idea of performing. And instead, so this idea of performed selves and taking on roles and controlling the way that works for a live audience or in a live theatre space. And various things that might be said to you along the way, like this attempt to just be yourself. So to be yourself in the moment, and then those kind of questions, well, what does that mean? And so we kind of found ourselves stumbling out of, Dublin in the late 80s, where there was, big economic problems, lots of, emigration out of the country, and ending up in this idyllic rural setting in Devon, being asked these really profound questions and being, hurled with complicated ideas about performance. And I think that started us on a journey where it's always interested us. It hasn't gone away. And then how that might get played out in those bigger questions, literally about identity and who you are and where you come from and where you might belong, and the ideas of masks, etc. It's just something we love, and we love it in the work that we watch, that we like, and then we also love it in thinking about the work we're going to make.
Let me bring all of you to kind of talk about the whole euthanasia, the kind of, there's a deer metaphor at the end. We see Rose / Julie's biological father, who's this sort of he's a difficult character to sympathize with, but there's that moment, you know, where we see him cradling this deer that he's had to dispatch. But I want to ask you about the end of the film. I mean, the idea of euthanasia on healthy animals and people, I mean, this is this very powerful thread running through the film, and quite shocking. And I suppose that's why it was compelling for you both to weave that in.
Yeah, I mean, it's a provocation, of course. I don't know if we're necessarily advocating that people who are as transgressive as the central character might be brought to a veterinary clinic and put down. But as an idea, it's entertaining to think about that idea. And you get that anyway in terms of, you know, revenge, what you might do. There's something infantile about that sometimes, that you might do this to somebody because they did that, you know, and what you would have done. Of course, people don't do that because we have by and large, we obey certain kind of norms, and we can't just do whatever we want. But it is provocation. And like, I think going back to Stephen's point earlier on, there's something of the Greek drama or Greek tragedy about all of that to some degree. So things are sort of they're dialed up in terms of I mean, it's not social realism, nor is it a highly poetic, dreamlike film, but there's something not quite real about it, in the sense of this is a film trying to be part of a social realist filmmaking tradition that we know and understand in the UK, or Ireland for that matter, certainly in the UK, but it exists slightly more towards a European form of visual expression. But I think in terms of the content, I mean, on a technical point, you'd be amazed at how many healthy animals are put down every year. And certainly during the credit crisis, when the financial crisis happened, there was a lot of animals being brought to veterinary places and being put down. And I suspect that has not gone away in the current climate as well. So actually vets have to deal with that. So that's one thing, but the more substantive issue.
I mean, sorry, just to jump in. I mean, I'm just thinking as you're speaking, it feels like, you know, Rose, her character, these healthy animals, the deer at the end, there's that sense of tragedy around lives wasted in some form. That's kind of what comes to my mind when I
and the caring,
the intention.
Well, I think the caring of them, I mean, it's a bit like the scene with Orla and Aidan in the car. That's not so straightforward as, you know, revenge. There's something very strange that happens between them by way of a consensual act. That's a very weird moment to have happen.
Orla, can you talk about that? Because wow, I did not see that coming. I sort of thought, you know, this man would fight until the end. I mean, that's what I expected, that you know, he was going to turn the weapon on you. Did he deserve a sort of painless, merciful, collaborative end with, you know, with his victim?
Well, I mean, look, she offered him his end. Sorry,
I'm not trying to ask you a moral question. I suppose I'm just wondering how you felt about the scene. You know, it's
no, absolutely. I know, I understand. I guess what I'm saying is although it's characterized sometimes as straight revenge, I don't think that's the case. I think I think there is an element of an offer of euthanasia. I think he is somebody who has clearly not realized his life in any way that's redeemable. He is not able to, and so there is that element of an offer and consent to a death rather than a murder. Now, that would not stand up in court, clearly. There was another element for me, and I'm slightly nervous of saying it because I'm not sure if I ever ran it by Joe and Christine, but I felt in myself leading up to that scene that Ellen knew that that Rose was gearing up to do it, that she felt Rose was going to try to right the wrong, the ancient wrong, that she felt that on her shoulders. And so the only way to become a mother to this child is to deal with it as the mother and not let it rest on the shoulders of the child. And that was the sort of propulsion towards that scene. How it played out, she couldn't have known. And well,
yeah. It's a beautiful film. I mean, it really does. It's gripping and it makes you think. I just want to bring Stephen back in. I mean, I know Stephen, I mean, watching it, you do the music, but you're experiencing all these emotions as well. I just wonder for you, how the collaboration with Christine and Joe, I mean, was it an easy sell? Was it just, did you all agree, okay, it's going to be this kind of Greek chorus, this is how we're going to deal with it? And as you do the music, do you deal with the other sound? As I say, like that kind of bird song, ethereal kind of bird song through the film, somehow it really works. It's kind of strange, but it really works, the whole soundscape of it.
Ooh, well, I suppose like let's say, first of all, a lot of weight was taken off my shoulders once we hit on the idea of the Greek tragedy. So I was never going to have to be in a position of finding sympathy for Aidan Gillen's character, or you know, I was never going to have to be in a position of trying to underscore what the audience could already see. So my job was to you know, delve deeper into the story, and the Greek chorus idea was presenting it as a historical idea that this hasn't happened. This isn't the first time this has happened. It's happened many, many times before, and it's going to keep happening. And it was myself and Joe sitting in a room initially, how it was come up with. I kind of put together a few different approaches to a couple of the longer scenes, and Joe came over to my studio for a weekend, and we just kind of listened to them. And then, as often happens, ironically, the very first thing that I had written was the one that I played him last, and it was the one that the two of us immediately went, "Wow, that's the way, that's what we want to do." And I still don't know why I did that, why I played him the best idea last, but once we got going, I would say like Joe and Christine are, by a factor of 10, are the most involved I've ever been with directors.
Because you do a real variety. You do animated films as well. I mean, this is so different to,
But I mean, it got to a stage where, I mean, I think we worked on the score for at least 2 months. And it got into a routine where I would write a cue in the morning time, send it over, because I'm in Wicklow, there in London, send it over, and then after lunch we would discuss it in depth. So we calibrated the score, you know, second by second. Every move, every moment of it was discussed at length, and it was really exciting. As I said, like I've said this before, some of the kind of more unusual aspects of it entirely came from Joe and Christine's side, like where Anne Skelly's character is walking around her mother's house. It was Joe's idea to bring out just the percussion on its own, and that sent us off in opened up a different avenue for us. So it really was an extremely collaborative approach, which sometimes had its funny moments. I know at the very, very end, the last scene where Anne turns is facing to the camera, you're not quite sure if it's a smile or whatever it is. And I was working on that cue over and over and over, and eventually Joe said, "God damn it, can you stop being such a showman? I just want to keep dialing it down and dialing it out." I said, "Literally, the music's doing nothing," and because it's still doing too much. So we like, but it was great. Like at that stage, like we were nearly reading each other's minds. But you know, it struck me writing the music that, you know, often why you do this job isn't to do the job and get it over with. The idea the reason you're doing is to be doing the job. So I was in no hurry to finish writing the score. I think we just kind of naturally felt, okay, we've reached the end now. It's done. But yeah, it was terrific.
Well, I think we've also reached the end here, but I just also want to say, I mean, the girl who plays Rose, Anne Skelly, just phenomenal. Her face, you know, just the emotion, everything. It was a brilliant, brilliant film. Thank you all so much for joining us today. A huge thank you to our guests today, directors Christine Molloy and Joe Lawlor, actor Orla Brady, and of course, composer Stephen McKeon. Please tell all your friends about Amplify. Join us for more Q&A soon. It's lockdown. What else are you going to do? Watch some great films and tell everyone about them. And Rose Plays Julie, definitely one to watch. Thank you all so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks. Bye.